Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to have just a quick pass at the Dutch election, the election in Holland. Now, Holland's, for those of you who aren't into geography, it's in northwest Europe, and it's got quite a decent coastline with the North Sea. It's a small country and area, but it's got quite a large population really for its size, about 17 million. So it's one of the most densely populated countries in the world on a per sort of square kilometre, square mile basis. Now, the recent federal election in Holland has returned the political party of Herr Geert Wilders, or if you're pronouncing it phonetically, Geert Wilders, as the largest political party. They'll have about 35 seats, maybe 36, 37, but at the moment it's looking like 35 seats. Now, this is in a 145 seat parliament, so he's well short of an outright majority. This is not unusual in Dutch politics. They typically have coalition governments of 4, 5, 6, even 7 parties to make up the numbers. So let's sort of have a quick look at Herr Wilders' chances of forming a government. Now, with 35 seats, he's obviously in the prime position there, and typically the leader of the largest political party becomes the prime minister. But there are considerable Herr Wilders is opposed to many of the bits and pieces of globalisation. He wants to stop, or so his platform is, he wants to stop mass migration, he wants to do deportations, and he wants to return the Dutch government to being the sovereign government of the nation, rather than just be flunkies for the EU or flunkies for the World Economic Forum, which is exactly what the Dutch government had become. So he's a nationalist and has been so for as long as he's been around on the political scene. At 35 seats, let's say it's going to be 30, it's going to be somewhere around that, 35 seats. How many more seats will he need? Well, he'll need close to 40 more seats to form a majority government. Now, the 3 other parties that are in double digits in terms of the seats they're going to hold. 2 of those parties, as I understand it, are opposed to Mr. Wilders, and one is kind of would support some of what he wants, but not everything. And then he would need, so let's suppose he gets one of those 3 other double-digit seat, 3 other parties with double-digit seats. Remember, there's another, 10 or 11 parties with a smaller representation, single-digit numbers, some with just 1 or 2 seats. Given that he's going to need 40 seats or thereabouts to form a government, he can probably count on, say, another 20, 21 seats from one of those other 3 bigger parties. So that brings him to, say, 55 to 58 type seat range, which means he's still going to need another 16 seats. He could probably get the Farmers' Party on there, and then he'll probably need 2 smaller single-issue type parties. So it's possible that he could form a coalition government, which again is not unusual. Coalition governments are how it works in Holland. I don't think they've ever had a situation where there wasn't a coalition government, but it would have to be with 4 or 5 other parties, meaning it'd be a coalition in total, including Herr Wilders' party. It'd be a coalition of 5, maybe even 6 political parties, 3 of those being quite small parties. But that's possible. Now, not all of those parties are actually necessarily against mass migration or against teaching gay, lesbian stuff in schools. So he's going to have to kind of compromise a little bit here and there if indeed such a coalition takes place. I imagine now to cure the mass migration thing, I mean, all he's got to do is just say you've got to speak good Dutch and you've got to have relevant qualifications and skills. That would just cut straight away. That would just stop 95 to 96.7% of the immigration would stop instantly if that criteria was introduced. He could stop family reunions and say, no, look, just because you're a citizen or because you're here on a work visa and you have a kid or something, that doesn't mean that you can stay in Holland as a citizen or anything like that. So there are things like that he could do. So if he stopped family reunion, there's a lot of people come to Holland or the West generally in the hope that they can bring over their whole wider family and their whole fucking third world peasant village to the West. So if he were to do that, again, a minor administrative thing really, then that would, a lot of the people who are in Holland would then go back to wherever they came from or try and go to another Western country and see if they could sucker their way in the door there. There are other minor administrative things that he could do. For example, the Dutch government could tax people sending money back to their relatives in the dirt poor basket case they came from. Put a decent tax on that, 25%, 30%, on the basis they're not spending their money in Holland. So they're taking a job, but they're not spending their money there. So the Dutch society doesn't benefit, or the Dutch economy rather doesn't benefit. So they should tax them the equivalent proportion of what they're saying could be 25%, 30%. That would make it uneconomical for them to stay in Holland working. So then again, they would leave and go somewhere else or go back where they came from. And these are quite minor administrative things. They're not big things. They're things that aren't sort of headline grabbing type dramatic things where you've got armies of police dragging screaming mothers to the plane or something like that to send them away. So these are sort of, also they could do things like you can't access Dutch unemployment benefits or government services unless you speak competent English and you've got 2 years, competent Dutch rather, and or English, and you've got 2 years to learn the language and learn it competently, or you don't get benefits. As soon as the benefits are cut off again, a lot of these people would leave. So they could probably get rid of 2/3 or just make it unviable for at least 2/3 of the people living there, just by bringing in some fairly simple measures of merit and competency in language and so on. And someone who's been 5 years on benefits has got 12 months to shape up, or they can go back, and so on and so forth. So these are a minor. I don't mean for like senior citizens. I mean working age people. So this would get rid of the freeloaders and get rid of the troublemakers pretty quickly. So there are minor administrative things that the government could do, something that any pro-globalist government would never dream of. But if Mr. Wilders is serious about it, he could do things like that. I think that the big dramatic stuff of deporting people and dragging them away and that sort of thing is, the globalist media would be all over that, and they'd be, it would just be too, the headlines and the pictures would just be too much. So now he's got, Mr. Wilders also needs to do things like cut off all funding to sociology courses in universities, because all they do is teach people how to hate Holland and hate the West and hate white people. He needs to bring out laws that say, look, if you hate on any racial group or religious group, regardless of whether it's white or Christians or so on, then that's criminal. I mean, if it's criminal to hate on brown people, it's criminal to hate on white people, and there will be severe penalties for it. Any university course or high school course that teaches or promotes hate against any group, be it white people or anyone else, will be losing their funding, and also the Department of Prosecutions will be chasing after them. That would be a huge step, just things at that level, which are again administrative to a large extent, and cut out the sociology courses, stop government funding for sociology courses. All that sort of stuff could be done and would make a huge difference to prevent international interference in Dutch elections or indeed Dutch education system or anything like that. The George Soros type thing. Stop all that. So there's just by doing these things, stops NGOs. To say NGOs, you can't act as activists and claim also to be charities. So cut the charities, cut their tax-free status. There are a whole lot of things that Herr Wilders could do that would make a radical, drastic, huge difference to Holland and to the lives of the Dutch people. Now, once the mass migration stops and people are being, self-deporting in effect, then the cost of living would come down, access to medical benefits and services would increase and improve. So the quality of life for the Dutch citizens would improve. So again, this would be beneficial all round. And I hope Herr Wilders does it. Now let's look at the other side of the thing. There are more pro-globalist politicians in the parliament, even with Herr Wilders getting 35 seats there. So if the two biggest parties who are pro-globalisation were to get together, pro-climate change and all this sort of stuff, they got together, they could make 45 seats without any trouble. That's two of them, or maybe 44 seats, say. So they only need another 30, and they could cobble together a collection of the smaller parties. It'd be a bit of a struggle. When you've got a coalition of sort of 10 parties, then it's very hard to keep all those different views and opinions and attitudes sort of together, and to keep the coalition cohesive and focused on pursuing its policy agenda. So my guess would be they'd struggle at that. Wouldn't be impossible, but struggle. I'd say now the globalists will be running around like crazy, trying to strong arm people, threaten them, offer fantastic jobs for their relatives in the banking and finance industry. All this sort of stuff will be going on in the background to try and cobble together a coalition that would oppose Herr Wilders and his possibility of a coalition. The greater likelihood is that, if you look at balance of probability, that Geert Wilders will be able to put together a coalition. He will have to concede some things, compromise a bit, but he can put together a coalition, will end up as Prime Minister. That's the greater probability. Let's suppose the other parties, a coalition of 11 parties gets together for the sole purpose of preventing Herr Wilders, then that coalition won't last. It'll fall, and there'll be other coalitions. And I think in the horse trading of the whole thing, Herr Wilders would end up anyway as being either A, the kingmaker, or B, the Prime Minister, no matter how it plays out. But I think this is cause for great optimism. The Dutch government was nothing more than a bunch of flunky stooges for the globalists, two-bit flunky stooges who were aggressively implementing the globalist project and the climate project, all this sort of bullshit. And the Dutch people have rejected that and have voted instead for the far more sensible platform of Herr Wilders, and I hope he gets up as Prime Minister and he implements the changes that he's been talking about, and I hope he's not another Giorgia Maloney that talks tough, and then as soon as he gets into office, then suddenly starts embracing mass migration and that sort of thing. You've been with Tassler today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.